Well, good morning. Today is Tuesday, February the 23rd, and we continue with our daily reading of Bright Evening Star by Madeleine as part of our Lenten devotions. At bedtime, my parents listened to the story of my day. If I'd done something unloving or wrong, I confessed it and was met with immediate forgiveness and hugs. Then, secure in their love, I would watch as they left for the theatre or the opera, my mother in an evening gown which smelt of her favourite fragrance, my father carrying his elegant top hat. They were glamorous as well as trustworthy. I learned more at home than I did at school, for I was not a successful schoolchild. I received little understanding from my teachers who did not like differences and who sided with the children who wanted someone to pick on. At home I read and wrote in the privacy of my little back room. It was a long time before I knew that my parents often quarreled, and that their arguments were almost always about me and my upbringing. It was even longer before I realized that my mother's unconventional suggestions would have been better for me than my father's conventional ones. But my father always won. He wanted me brought up like an English nursery child, occasionally seen, but not heard. They agreed on the best dancing school, but not on acrobatic lessons. Where was God in the 20s? War was on the horizon. My parents took tango lessons with a group of friends. My father coughed. My mother miscarried a little boy. The word cocktail came into the vocabulary. My father's many elder sisters were invited to lunch, and if my father heard about it ahead of time, he vanished for the day. He went to his office in the Flatiron building and worked, writing short stories, articles, plays, movie scripts. He could no longer do the travelling which had been his work as a foreign correspondent. He went to church, and I was too young to understand the expression of pain on his face. The world was uneasy. People worried about the drinking, the parties, the jazz, the changes the war had brought about. Things were not going to go back, be the way they were. Earth time moves only in one direction. Prohibition was voted in as a countermeasure to the search for pleasure. I listened to my parents talking and asked what prohibition was. It's a new law, I was told, to stop people from drinking alcohol. I had heard the word cocktail, but I had been blessed in never seeing the abuse of alcohol. My parents had one drink and one drink only before dinner. It was a ritual for them, a time when they sat quietly together after the tensions of the day and talked. My father said prohibition will make people drink more alcohol and worse alcohol. Legalism does not make for moderation. I learned later that his words were very true, but my parents were moderate. Jesus and his friends drank wine, and I assumed that they were moderate too. I still did not see very much of my parents, whose lives had a rhythm very different from a child's. But when they came to say good night to me at bedtime, they gave me their full attention. When they punished me, I knew that I deserved it. I didn't mind a smack with my mother's silver hairbrush. I did not resent it. I had done something wrong and deserved a reminder that it was wrong and should not be repeated. I most certainly did not consider the smack child abuse. But a close friend of mine who was also smacked with her mother's silver hairbrush did consider it child abuse. It took me a long time to figure out why she considered the silver brush child abuse and I did not. My parents were Episcopalians, but they lived in a wide world of the arts, theatre, music, painting. It bothered my mother that some of her artists did not live exemplary lives, but that did not stop her from loving Mozart or George Eliot. When I did something that deserved spanking with the silver hairbrush, I got a smack, followed by a hug and a kiss, and that was the end of it. What I had done was over and was not referred to again. My friend grew up with parents who belonged to a rigid evangelical church. It was far more important that you live a virtuous Christian life than that you might write Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. When my friend did something that was considered wrong and the silver hairbrush was brought out, she was told that she had hurt Jesus, that she had done what she had done was not left alone after the smack with the silver hairbrush, but she was reminded over and over what a terrible thing she had done. So yes, in her case, the silver hairbrush constituted child abuse. It is often not so much what we do as how we do it that makes the difference. The punishment that was terrible for me was being forbidden to read for 24 hours. Once during this discipline, I confessed that I had forgotten for a moment and opened a book. My mother did not seem to hear me, and she did not lighten my sentence. She was, as it were, not there. I was forced to realize that something was wrong, but I was not sophisticated enough to know what it was, or that I was part of it. My parents fought over where I was to go to school. I had started in a small school that went only through grade 3. My first little report cards were all that any parent could hope for. As usual, Madeleine and Alexander led the school. Alexa, my first good friend, who had stayed in touch despite vast geographic distances. For 4th grade, a new school was found for me. Surely my poor report cards on both the academic and behavioral side should have told my parents that something was wrong. I went from the top of the class to the bottom. Everything I did left something to be desired. Why was I understood and encouraged in my first little school, and misunderstood and criticized in the new, larger one? Alexa was in a different school, but one weekend I was invited to go with her to her family's country cottage. Alexa came from a rich and notable family. The cottage was a mansion. But what I remember of that weekend was going for a solitary walk in the woods near the house. Alexa's uncle was spending the weekend at the cottage, and he came to me and he began talking kindly. He sat on a log and pulled me onto his knees. Then he began to kiss me wetly. All I knew was that this was not right, and I slithered out of his grasp, though he grabbed at me. I ran. At first I could hear him following me, but I ran faster, and evidently he did not pursue me. When I got home, I was able to tell my mother what he had done. She was calm in agreeing with me that his behavior was wrong, and told me I would never again be allowed to go to Alexa's for the weekend. Another time, I was sent to spend 2 hot July weeks in the country with friends of my mother, 2 women and the daughter of one of them, a girl a couple of years older than I. I was not made to feel part of the family. The 2 women were polite, but they excluded me. On the first evening, I sat down at the table instead of standing and waiting for grace to be said, and was chillingly reprimanded. Since at home I ate alone on a tray in my room, my lapse was understandable. On Sundays, when I ate with my parents after church, we said grace, but my regular time to thank God was at bedtime, when I said my prayers. I mumbled apologies, and I was not hungry. At night in our bedroom, the girl began to pinch me as punishment for not being a good Christian and threatened terrible things if I screamed. Nevertheless, I told her mother, who said I was speaking nonsense, and she would not listen to lies. The pinching continued, painful and incomprehensible. I was covered with bruises. When I got home after 2 weeks of misery, my mother certainly saw the bruises. I think I was reassured that I would never have to go back. These are mild examples of abuse, but they were abuse. My mother's hairbrush was not abuse, but these were. They were abnormal. I was not permanently scarred by them, but I do remember them, and they gave me a good idea of what abuse is like. Alexa's uncle came from a secular society. The 2 women were Christian. What made that man, important in the world of art, want to touch my prepubescent body? Why were those 2 women judgmental and unwelcoming? Why did the girl enjoy giving pain? My childhood was full of ups and downs, insights and blindnesses. I did have more opportunities than many children for daydreaming, reading, writing my own stories. I believed in fairy tales and wee folk, and I knew that ultimately there had to be a happy ending. I clung to that because I knew that much in between was not happy. Jesus grew up in a small country where many freedoms had been taken away by the conquering Romans. If the Jewish people were not actively at war, they were still living in a country occupied by foreigners who had taken them over. I knew that there was something terribly wrong in a world of war in Jesus' day, in mine. Why was I given a book at school that showed the Huns impaling Belgian babies on their bayonets? It left a terrible impression of terror on me. It was like Herod ordering his soldiers to kill all the children under 2 because he was afraid that a new baby had been born that might take away the little power that the Romans allowed him to have. It made even more terrible my father's words that we were moving towards yet another war. Why didn't Jesus stop war? Why did he allow people to hurt and hate? Even with these unanswerable questions, I took Jesus and the love of God for granted, and it never occurred to me that this love did not cover the entire planet. God's love was as great for those in strange countries who had never heard of Jesus as it was for me, who went to an Episcopal church every Sunday. It did not occur to me that anybody could put limits on God's love. All that was being discovered in the world of science simply emphasized the greatness of the Creator. Science was never in my mind a threat. It simply provided new ways of telling the story and glorifying God. I accepted mystery, and I knew that there was much I did not understand. That, of course, was one reason for growing up, to understand. I thank you for joining me today for this short reading of our book, Bright Evening Star, and I look forward to being with you again tomorrow. So take care. God bless. Goodbye.